listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Tom Collington. Joining me, as usual, Mr. Kevin Durso. Kevin, how are you today?
Doing all right. How are you?
Doing all right. It's been an okay week. We kind of got into it towards the end of our last week's show. It's been a predictable week, and we'll touch on that, but some fun stuff still happened anyways. As we're diving into it, make sure you're following us on social media at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso everywhere except Blue Sky, where he's just at Kevin Durso. Also, find us everywhere you find your podcasts, including sportstalkphilly.com, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Okay. So, as previously mentioned, it was a bit of a predictable week in terms of the actual results, but it was still a fun one. We talked, as mentioned, we talked on last week's Looking Ahead segment about that Detroit game kind of being the decider for the week, because you have Columbus on one end of the spectrum, although in the standings they've been okay, but and then on the other end of the spectrum you have Minnesota, who's one of the better teams in the league, and spoiler alert, those games kind of went as expected, with Detroit being the toss-up. But we'll be diving into it here. Let's get into that Columbus game. What did you see out of the boys that night?
They played really well against a bad team. I mean, the analysis this week is so basic, it's not even funny. They beat two teams that are not very good, and they lost to a team that's really good. Yep. Let's end the show. I'm kidding.
So Thursday against Detroit. Okay. No, but there were a couple good things to talk about from Tuesday night. Like, you get a goal out of Noah Cates, you get another one out of Owen Tippett, he stays hot. You get another one out of you get two more out of Travis Konechny, he stays hot. Like, it wasn't a bad night, like you said. It was kind of just it was a difference in roster that there's really not a whole lot Columbus can do about that on 11 nights.
See, I don't even go that far with it, because I don't think the Flyers roster is necessarily that much better. I think it was just they came out and played the way that they played the previous week, pretty much. I mean, if you go back to like what we were talking about last week, and we hit on, this is, I guess, putting aside the Utah game, I guess, and going to even though you lost a bunch of games, if you play like you played against Florida and you play like you played against Boston, then you'll beat the Columbuses and Detroits of the world, because it's that has nothing to do with roster construction at that point. That's just, you're playing really well. You're doing things really well. And they came out right away and got on the board by having a really good shift with that Cates line. And that starts the thing off. I don't know that Tippett's goal necessarily should go in. It's from distance. It doesn't, it's a good shot. We know Tippett's got a good shot, so that's probably what you're going to chalk it up to more times than not. But I think that might be one that typically gets stopped in situations, and it doesn't. So you get an even bigger edge. Then you score on the power play in the second period, because with Konechny, and that opens it up even further. And really, I think that one of the important things too is, after Columbus gets on the board, you have a chance to be in that same situation again, leading by 2, going to the third, something that's plagued you over the past several games, and you get another one with a minute to go in the period. And I think that relaxes everything, and it changed the dynamic of the game. You scored again in the first 2 minutes of the third period. So that really feels like it puts it away. Like, as much as Columbus was pushing over the last 10 minutes and got a couple of goals, it didn't feel like that kind of game. It was more or less a 5-1 game for the most part, and that's the way you're going to take this. I just didn't see much, from the other side at all. Like, they played better than the other team. They won because of it. They scored 5 goals because of it. A lot of their better players delivered in those situations.
I was going to say, multi-point nights out of Travis Konechny, Matvei Michkov, and Morgan Frost. That'll help.
And I don't even know that I consider in the same way that I could throw Frost into that same conversation. Like, Frost,
wow, he happened to have 2 points in that game.
No. I'm saying it's not even that. He has way more ups and downs than the other two. It's just, this was one of the ups where there was more production involved. That's about it. I don't have anything. I don't have anything on you kind of come to expect from Konechny and from Michkov that points are going to come at some point. And for Frost, it doesn't happen as often. Frost scoring a goal there was only his 4th of the season, not Konechny getting to 15 on the season. There's a big difference.
And regardless, you get 2 points in Columbus. You get out of there with the win.
Very, very
Uh,
important for them with the way Utah went, by the way, that I
yeah,
think, because if you lose that one too, and you started December off with, I go back to like what we had talked about before, and I basically, like you said, when we did looking ahead, I laid it out pretty well at that like with you've got 2 games that I think you can win, and I think you need them because if you don't get them and you're on either an extended, it's a 4-game losing streak, you beat Detroit, or whether you beat Columbus and then just go right out and lose to Detroit, whichever combination you want to have out of that, you probably could have and should have been 1-1-1 through the first 3 games of December. And now you would be looking at the possibility of either 0-3-1 or 1-3-1 or some combination, you know what I mean? And it's just or worse, honestly, like what if you were 0-4-1? If you're looking at that, I think it takes all of the good vibes of how you finished November with a 5-game point streak and throws them right out the window, and you're back to you're not just
well, it almost feels like the Dave Haxtell days at that point, where you win 10 games and you still miss the playoffs, and you're a very streaky team, and
I wouldn't go that far because it wasn't that kind of winning streak. It's just more of, I think it takes the vibes that we had from 1-5-1. Look at what they've done by the end of November. You can throw all of that away with a 5-game losing streak too. You know what I mean? Like
that's
that's,
true.
that's what it is. I mean, I told you last week it qualifies as a 3-game losing streak. They got 1 point in the overtime against Boston. That doesn't matter though. You get 1 point over 3 games, and all of a sudden you're now 6th in the division. And what we talk about going into that Columbus game? If you lose and everything else goes the right way, you're going to be last place in the Metro by the end of that night. When 3 days earlier we were having a conversation, or not 3 days earlier, I'm sorry, there was a whole week of games, but 3 games earlier we were having a conversation about, well, look at where they are now in the standings. At least you're back to that. Like, they win that game, they immediately jump back into 4th, and it's like, okay, you're there. They're as
Well,
it sits, and we'll get through more of the games this week, but as it sits this morning, they're on the outside looking in, but they're 4th in the division, so it's and not by much. I think is it technically a tie, and it's just games played that comes into it, I think.
something
So
like that. But well,
so
and I was gonna say, if they lose both these games, by the way, I don't think we get our quote of the week. The quote of the week, of course, being from Joel Farabee. We're really into high fiving right now, because that's really funny, man.
I mean, the thing
We're
is,
really into high fiving each other right now is a great line.
well,
The fun,
it is the little kind of like winning. I don't want to call it a gag because it's not like but it's an inside thing that they have. It's their little celebration on the ice. They kind of
all
do
the
it.
clapping.
It looks the clapping thing's different. That's inside the room. That's different.
It's
No, the
yeah,
other.
but they know those videos go on social media. They're not stupid.
I'm not saying that they don't know that the videos go out. I'm talking about the thing on the ice. There are pictures all over, but like they don't send 5 photographers into the locker room to say, here, they're gonna do this
No.
standing ovation clapping thing. They have the team guy in there, and that's about it. Right? Like I'm saying this is something that they do on the and here's the thing too. It's funny. It's not something that I see because I'm getting up and walking down to get the elevator to go downstairs. So I'm not
Right?
watching their handshake line or whatever. It's very baseball-esque in a way.
Oh yeah.
I know
Oh,
there's and I know
big
there's
vibes. Big
well, and I
vibes.
know there's other like obviously there's been because this was what did Jordan Hall did a story on this, I think. So I'm gonna go pull this up now because I saw something about this. Um, so I'll go try to find all the stuff where the quotes come in and things like that because um
But yeah, while you're looking that up, it is one of the reasons I wore the Phillies hoodie today. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button. But yeah, that is one of the reasons I'm wearing the Phillies hoodie today, because this does feel like a very vibey team, and it feels like especially a lot of these younger guys, a lot of the guys who stayed here over the summer. I know I keep talking about that group. It seems like they're friends. They're not just teammates hanging out. They are genuinely enjoying spending time at the rink together. And I think that is a good thing for the room.
the thing is that that's nothing new though. Like
I
I
know.
know that they have like every year something different happens. Like last year was the dog mask thing, right? And that was kind of the big rally thing and all that stuff like that. Now this year it's the belt. This year it's this high five thing that's going on now. Things like that. Whatever works, right? Like whatever rallies you together, I get it. but there's also not outside of, again, we've had this conversation a few times, outside of maybe two guys, there's nobody who's playing get to know you in that room. It's the same guys as last year, so there's really nothing. There's nothing that you need to do to familiarize yourself with anybody, kind of, right? Like you already have
just fall right into it.
So the story, by the way, with the high five thing is apparently this is based off of something with Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. That
It's something
there was
like
a video.
that,
That there's a video that the Chargers put up on. So I'll just call it social. Obviously, like the one I'm seeing is TikTok, but like I'm sure it went everywhere. That everybody gets a high five. He's running around after the Chargers won a game. Everybody gets a high five. And Joel Farabee basically said something along the lines of, that seeing the video, everybody gets a high five. We thought it was hilarious. We wanted to bring high fives back. Everyone gives knucks now. We wanted to bring high fives back. So that's where this came from, apparently. At the time, this was Friday, I guess, that this story was posted. So this was right before they had lost the game to Minnesota. So in the previous 17 games, they were 10-4-3 following the Detroit game. And there was so like you already brought up the Farabee quote. We've been really into high-fiving this year and clapping for guys. Morgan Frost is quoted in the article saying, "I go back in line like 6 times."
And my favorite thing about it is that it's the insistence of the glove removal before the high five.
Sure.
Just throw it because every team just does like high five or either high fives or like they said fist bumps and whatever. But I love that they're like, no, we're gonna take the glove off and do a palm to palm, like a good old fashioned high five. It's hilarious to me. It feels very baseball. It really does.
So do you want to turn this? Well, but it's funny. So it feels baseball. It's coming from a football thing, apparently. That it's a football clip that was out, with the Chargers and all that stuff. And you got hockey players doing this that are saying, "Let's bring the high five back." It's all funny. Look, like I said, whatever works to bring you together, I guess, is whatever it is. This is not a direct association with the clapping thing, which started really. So apparently, the story with this one is that in Columbus, or at least the best video of this, I'm sure they've done the clapping thing for a little longer, but in Columbus in particular, Nick Seeler fought Matthew Olivier after
in a great spot.
Well, but he did this in more or less, I feel like it was in response to the hit on Emil Andre, which look, take it for what it is or whatever. They said he was a healthy scratch for the last 2 games. I do think there was maybe a little something more to that than just whatever, because honestly, and I'm not trying to jump too far ahead, but if you're rolling out Igor Zamula to play on your second power play unit in Minnesota, I don't think that you're thrilled about that by any stretch.
I don't think Emil Andre is fully healthy.
But we'll get more clarity on that, and you're really going to know something. And because I don't think he was that banged up. I don't think, like, not to the point where you miss Thursday and then an afternoon game on Saturday, and then don't make it back after 3 days off away from games. If he does not play Wednesday, you have more reason to believe that this is actually a thing. And to be honest, to be honest, why do you play the same lineup after you take a guy out, even if you insist he's healthy, right? You do it because you won a game, you played well, you reward the team, you say that's the lineup I'm going with, and then they lost a game. So now you probably make a change.
Fair enough. Yeah. So let's move on from the Columbus game and let's actually move into that Detroit game that you were talking about there. Also known as the day that the Philadelphia Scott Laughtons beat the Detroit Red Wings.
Dude just loves playing against the Detroit Red Wings, let me tell you.
Man, it is actually wild, the Scott Laughton Detroit stats. Do you happen to have them in front of you, or because it is absurd how much he likes on the Detroit Red Wings.
I'm going to do my best right now. I know I can, I'll be able to get his numbers up against a team pretty easily. That's not hard. I'd love to get his game log because I want to go and just see how many games recently, the number, because the number of goals they've played Detroit with relative, they play everybody with relative regularity. You play every team at least twice a year. That's not like crazy to talk about.
Yeah,
And
but Detroit's
well, I'm
also in
saying-
the conference, so you play them
well,
3 times a year.
I was about to say that it's
Yeah.
not the same thing anymore. Where it used to be a Western Conference thing, and you would barely see that
Yep.
team. You see them 3 times a year now,
Yep.
but it's got to be something like if I went and found the 3 games last year. Well, they've only played them once this year, obviously. If I found the 3 games last year and maybe the 3 games the year before, I think the numbers I would find are even more outrageous. Like it feels like I've watched Scott Laughton have really good games against Detroit every year for the last however many years. I guess this is the best way I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So let me start with this one because I'll pull up his career numbers against.
Yeah, do that because he only has 102 career goals,
So
and a significant portion of them are against the Detroit Red Wings.
So Scott Laughton has played 20 games against the Detroit Red Wings, has 13 goals and 19 points. Okay, now
13 of 102.
Yeah, I know. Well, that was the lead for my story, by the way, was that he came in with 9 goals. 9 of his 98 goals were against Detroit, and he finished the night with 13 of his 102.
Insanity.
Now, for what it's worth, he has his next highest total is 13 goals and 17 points against Washington. So now that's an even crazier number, by the way. That 26 of his 102 goals are against 2 teams in the league, and the other remaining ones are all against everyone else. Like,
yeah, and only one of them is a divisional team. That's the even crazier part.
But what I'm saying is that I won't find, like, truly, there's not another team on this list that you can find where he has more than 7 against somebody else, and he's got 13 against 2 teams that account for more than a quarter of his goals.
At this point, Scott Laughton's been around long enough that, when he started out, you were playing your division, 6, 7, 8 times a year.
Sure.
You saw Washington a lot.
Well, this is where I was going with that, is that he's got 17 against Washington. He's also got 16 against both Pittsburgh and the Islanders. So but it's all division, and the number of, and that's the point. The number of games played against those teams is in the 30s. This is a team he just played his 20th game against, and he's up to 19 points against them. Now I'm going to go and go a step further and just go to the last couple of years. Here we go. So 2 seasons ago, in the 3 games against Detroit, he scored 3 goals and had 4 points. That was 22-23. Okay, so that's technically 4 seasons ago, I guess, but still, right? Then in 23-24, a goal and an assist for 2 points in the 3 games against Detroit. Then last season, that was last season. And then obviously this season, he drops 4 goals on them. But that's what I'm saying. So in the last 3 seasons, though, of games, the last 7 games you've played against them, he's got 8 goals in 7 games. And it goes, and I know it goes back further than that, because I believe they said something about it's 11 in his last 11 games against them or something like that.
Well, you know why, right?
Go ahead.
Scott Laughton's from Oakville, Ontario. 3 hours and 15 minutes from Little Caesars Arena.
So you're calling this, what are you calling this, hometown, basically?
Hometown hype.
No, because his hometown game is Toronto.
Okay. And how much cheaper is it to drive to Oakville?
I get it.
Go to a Toronto Maple Leafs game.
For his family, I'm sure he can spring for tickets.
Listen here. No, I'm not worried about the tickets. I'm talking about the other costs, right? Listen, if you're family members with a player, they might hook you up with tickets. You're not going to necessarily expect them to hook you up with travel expenses, gas and hotels, and et cetera, et cetera. And would you rather, not rather, but price wise, there's Detroit and there's Toronto. Listen, I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if more family members show up to Detroit. Yes, I'm sure family members show up to Toronto as well. But it might be a little bit easier. What if they have family in that area?
It also feels like it's a null and void point. This was a home game.
Yeah, but it's the team. It's the team. Once you figure out how,
fine. It doesn't have anything to do with who shows up, though, is what I'm getting at. To me,
he's got it solved.
Okay, but I think there's no rhyme or reason to it. I think it's hockey, right? We're also talking about the guy who had 3 goals coming into that game and then finished with 7. There is no rhyme or reason to stuff like that, other than that you just have a night.
That's true. I did also want to mention Scott Laughton was the best player in that game. Cam Talbot might have been the second best because
which
he was
which
absolutely
which
spectacular.
and I'm not trying to jump to looking ahead too early or whatever, but apparently the very next day in practice he hurt himself. So
Oh,
now and that's relevant obviously with the next team because I tend to believe, and it's it's not it's the question I'd love to ask John Tortorella that I'm not really going to probably be able to do unless I get to a practice to talk about it, because it's not a post game question. It's not something that you ask to get substance out of. It's more of a pregame question. But he talks a lot about how he's very hands off with the goalies. He doesn't want anything to do with them. He leaves that to Kim Dillabaugh. That's your goalie coach. Whatever they say goes. And that was what had a lot to do with the Sam Ersson injury, because it was, when he's ready, they'll tell me. Like, I'm not getting anything. I'm not trying to do anything with this. That's on them. I wonder if Kim Dillabaugh looks at the schedule ahead and tries to line guys up so that it works out, that you have guys who in a month like this month's schedule is very unique. You just played Columbus on Tuesday. You played Detroit on Thursday. You're going into this week now, and you're going to play Detroit on Wednesday. You're going to play Columbus on Saturday. You also have LA on the schedule this week, who you see again at the end of the month. I'm curious, when you have a schedule like that where you play the same team, and ironically enough, two of them you don't see regularly interdivision wise, like they're not interdivision. Do you line it up so that you sit there and you say, at least going into it, I want to see how the guy plays, and if he plays well against them, I'm just going to roll the guy right back out the next time around, because there's already, now you know what to expect from certain guys. You've seen them shoot on you. It should be an experience thing. I think that the back, like, for a perfect example, there's the Detroit LA game this week is a back-to-back. Kolosov's getting one of them. I would like to believe that Kolosov's getting the game against the team he just faced this week and played well against, right?
and that would be this game, by the way. This is the Detroit game, so I think this is a good time to kind of get in to our backup conversation.
Well, we can get there in a minute. What I'm saying is,
yeah.
because what I'm saying is that would also line up that Ersson can get the last two. He plays LA. He probably plays Columbus again, like he did already this week. I wouldn't, LA is the back end of a back-to-back where they play Anaheim. I think that lines up where Kolosov gets the lesser opponent and Ersson gets LA again. Like, I just wonder if you go into it with that mindset. I'm going to play this guy both times against blank, because and before I go into like the Flyers goalie situation, this is what I was trying to get back to is that Talbot played so well, and like you alluded to in the group chats, he always plays well against them. It feels like you get that kind of Cam Talbot performance.
You get Vezina Cam Talbot back, absolutely.
And I would believe that Cam Talbot probably has the start in this Wednesday game until you see that there was an issue with the goaltender, like that he's tweaked up. I don't know what the situation is, that because Alex Lyon was banged up a little bit. He was a scratch as an injury for Saturday, or for Thursday, I mean, sorry. So
who's the third? Is it still Ville Husso?
Well, Husso got to start Saturday. Okay. Now, whether or not that translates 3 days down the line and he starts again, or Lyon's back or whatever, because Lyon played him last year and he left the game, but like he played well the game that he did play them, so I wouldn't be shocked.
Detroit does also have those same 3 days off.
Well, and Detroit also, for what it's worth, because I'm sitting there trying to act like they only have 3 guys, they also have Kosa.
Oh, Sebastian Kosa,
who did play for them while they were trying to figure some stuff out. So he might be a guy who comes into the equation as well. I don't know. It just depends on the severity of what's going on with Talbot now, going along with the severity of what Lyon's trying to come back from. Husso's obviously the guy that they turn to. I think Talbot they knew about, so they would have had time to get somebody up there. Wasn't it Vancouver? I think I saw that had to get a e-bug in.
Ottawa.
Oh, Ottawa did. Okay, oh, that's right. It was Allmark was playing, and
somebody got hurt. And then, well, it's really funny because the guy was...
I know, the guy was running to the arena.
You've seen that clip? The guy was running down the side of the highway with the giant goalie bag on his back.
What I was trying to get at from that was the fact that there was a lot of goalie stories going, because Talbot was obviously also part of that equation. So you know what I mean? So it was like one of those things. So yeah, now I think we can turn our attention to the Flyers goalies more than the...
Speaking of goalies, when you were laying out kind of the schedule for the rest of the month and how the goaltending situation might line up, I noticed that you didn't say the name Ivan Fedotov.
Because there was no reason to, because John Tortorella actually went there and gave us more information than we typically get sometimes on things, and essentially said, this is decided. Sam's the number one, which we are used to hearing about. We know Sam Harrison holds that spot, but Aleksei Kolosov has basically solidified himself as the backup at this
Is the
point.
number two.
That's what
Yeah.
the team has said.
And John
And there,
Tortorella said that he had a conversation with Ivan Fedotov and explained to him kind of why he's third and what they're kind of how they're handling it. And he obviously didn't share that with us, but
the question,
talked with Fedotov about what the plan is going forward. And yeah,
for now. And the question, I think the question is whether or not as the third, he ever gets into a game as the third and they go there to keep him active, or do you eventually do what probably should be done and put him on waivers and pass him through? He's got a big enough contract. I don't think he would be claimed, and he goes to the Phantoms and he starts playing there. It's
it
about
would
all
be
there is to it. And I don't,
frankly, it would be a really unfortunate claim because I think he had shown signs of finding his game, and I think a little time in the minors
well, and
would do wonders for him.
I think what you feel good about right now is that I understand it. Fedotov had a couple of games where I'm sure, like, you can qualify some of the goals probably as not very good, and the numbers weren't great. Like, I'm pulling up his game. I'm trying to pull up his game log. Admittedly, it's been a while since he's played. Like, as soon as Harrison came back, like, it kind of started to line up this way. His last start wasn't good. He started against Florida. He got pulled after the first period. It was obvious he wasn't too sharp. Before that, he played the Rangers and looked really good, though.
Mm.
And I
But
think,
to be fair, the Rangers are making every goalie look really good right now. But
well, and I was going to say what I think is more reflective is he took the shootout loss against Vegas, which it's not about the shootout portion. It was more the 4 goals on 30
the goals
shots
that did
part.
go in, yeah.
Like, look, I don't hate a game that I don't think they played well against Carolina, that he takes a loss giving up 4 on 37 shots. Like, you just didn't play
Awful
well.
in that game. Yeah.
Right. Like, you're probably more or less out to dry and you do the best you can. But the way, like, I think what's more intriguing about Kolosov right now is the athleticism, and that he's come in and probably given you a shot in the last handful of games that maybe you didn't deserve. He's the guy in goal against Nashville. He's the guy in goal against St. Louis games. He's the guy in goal against Chicago, for that matter, that even though you're trailing in the game, he's keeping you involved so that when you come back and you win a bunch of those, what are they? All 3 of those games are 3-2 overtime wins.
Like that, yeah.
But so 2 goals consistently is a nice number.
Yep.
He doesn't have the best performance against Florida. You go right back to him, though, because he's the one who keeps you in that game. Because let's face it, Kolosov gives up 4 goals against Florida. 3 of them are power play goals. You feel a little less bad.
It's a really good power play team.
Right. You feel a little less bad about your goalie when a great power play is doing all the work. He essentially is a big part of the reason you get the game in Boston to overtime, even though, like, you had established a lead. He's playing really well, making some big saves at key times. Boston just does what Boston does in Boston against the Flyers and finds a way later in the game. But I think you look at, even though he gave up a goal right after, you look at the pad save on Morgan Geekie, you look at some of the saves he made during the penalty kills of that game, and you say to yourself, that's what's going to keep you in a game. They needed to do better to get the puck out of the zone in those situations, or try to figure out, or not, or we're talking about penalty kill at that point. Don't take so many penalties like they did in those 2 games that you had him. One he played in relief, and one that he had to eventually take the loss in overtime. You make this announcement essentially, and he comes out and he plays a brilliant game against Detroit, and he's now got wins in 4 of his last 6, and he's 4-1-1 in that time, and 4 of the 6 games are 2 goals or less allowed. So again, what do we try to say? Like, when we looked at Fedotov's numbers and you looked at the numbers across the board, where it was like, okay, what did he bring everything down to? You look at Kolosov's numbers right now, and they're not great, but they're getting better and they're becoming more respectable backup numbers. Goals against average is up in the league. Save percentage is down in the league. It's just the nature of the beast. And they brought this up on the broadcast. and I forget who it was. They said something about it or whatever, but they brought this up again in the Minnesota game. Maybe it was Marc-Andre Fleury because that's who they faced. I don't remember exactly, but it was brought up. Why is save percentage down? And the response had something to do with you're not seeing that weak shot from the wall near as much anymore that qualifies as an easy save. The chances are better. Shots are more selective. So they're going in more often. So at this point, what's a normal league average save percentage? It's probably 895.
For sure. Well, and I did want to mention, just as we kind of move on from Ivan Fedotov, because he is looks like he's going to be your third guy for now, and maybe end up in the minors eventually if he can pass through waivers. Frankly, I think that would probably be the best thing for him at this point. I think he has still played a dozen games on North American ice, roughly. And I think the ability to go down to the AHL, and I know you don't typically want to be developing a 28-year-old goalie, but have him go spend a year in the AHL, face a lower quality of player, respectfully, to the AHL, see a little bit more success, hopefully figure out the angles, figure out all the this, that, the other, that's not quite at that NHL speed. And I could see Fedotov showing up in camp next year and challenging for one of your primary goalie spots. But I think a little bit of time in the AHL would do him wonders if he could get it.
The thing is that there's an element where like you got to put all the factors together and realize what's happening here. Fedotov is running out of time to establish himself. And while he had that great stretch, and I think that it's important that they have a third guy that you actually feel like you can trust. That's a big element of this. He can get you a win. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I immediately think of the game in Tampa where he was the guy. They had to sign an emergency backup that night because Kolosov tweaked something in pregame skate, in morning skate. Ersson was already hurt. You knew without, like, they had even announced Kolosov was going to start that game. Fedotov has to play. He then goes out and outduels Andrei Vasilevsky at the other end, wins a game in a shootout, first NHL win. Didn't have anything going for him before that in terms of NHL success from a win standpoint anyway. And
yeah, we've seen flashes of brilliance from him.
And I think of that. I think of the game against the Rangers. This is not going back to Sam Ersson, the rotating group of Cal Peterson and Fedotov coming in. And then when I really need a guy, Felix Sandstrom's number 3. We're past that at this point, I think. You've got a guy who, if you really needed to go to number 3, you can feel a little bit more confident in. And I just think that, and look, we don't know the angle of this part of it. Obviously, all the stuff with Kolosov in the offseason and like kind of the desire to be an NHL. But the fact of the matter is, the last 6 starts, he's really earned the extended look. Like this isn't, hey, the guy's got a goals against of 350 and a save percentage of 870, and we just are giving it to him because if we don't give it to him, he's leaving.
He's gone to Russia, right?
His numbers are better than Fedotov's. And
absolutely.
His play lately
his play is better.
Fedotov's. And I just keep going back to whether you want to pull the save against Boston that we've been talking about for 2 weeks, whether you want to look at the save that he makes in a game that they are, for all the talk of the Scott Laughton game, it's a 2-0 game. They give up a goal with 4 minutes left. The situation is ripe for them to lose another third period lead. And he makes a save on Eric Gustafsson that is which there's no other way for me to describe that save other than to say that is a save pulled straight from the book of Sergei Bobrovsky. It's that athletic, I'm going to pull my whole body across and get you. And he looks so much like Bobrovsky. It's crazy. And maybe you owe it to yourself. I don't know if anybody's gotten in the ear of this because it's not the same coaching staff. It's not same management. Danny Briere might know a little thing or two about the story, obviously, because he was part of it in some capacity as a player.
Yeah.
But I think somebody kind of has to get in your ear a little bit and be like, don't screw this up. You've got a 22-year-old kid who's athletic, who's having a decent stretch of games right now. Don't screw it up. I don't know what Sam Ersson's long-term future is as this goes forward. You're multiple years away with 2 19-year-olds in the system.
I was about to say, well, and in other future goalie news that we don't have a tab for, I'm just going to touch on it real quick. Carson Bjarnason was named to Canada's World Juniors team, as well as Jet Luchenko and Oliver Bunk. Denver Barkey was a late cut again. It's unfortunate, but hopefully he does what he did last year, where he comes back and absolutely torches the OHL. So,
Well, he loses a couple of teammates in the process, which is exactly how it went last year. So,
well, and he's going to come back and go, "Oh, I have to play more?
yeah,
Oh, okay, no
cool.
problem."
Yeah, I know. It's motivation for sure.
And hopefully he takes it as such.
But well, first of all, by the way, and this is specifically about Bjarnason in this case. I never know what direction it's going because when they always name three goalies to these rosters, you never know which guy is the guy who gets
The
all of
guy.
the right. So I'd have to wait until they start playing games to see that, like, oh, Bjarnason's the guy. Okay, that's great.
I think there's a chance he's the guy. I don't think there
Oh, I
is
think there's a
one
chance.
clear. I don't think there's one clear cut. Uh, when certain goalies are there, they are the guy. I don't think there's necessarily a clear cut answer this year,
No,
but
there's
I think
not.
he's got a real chance.
There was only 4 in camp, and they keep 3 anyway. So it's like there was
Well, right, and I think any one of them could steal it with some good performances early.
Sure, absolutely. So, but I just think that you're looking at a situation right now where Kolosov, there's a way Kolosov is the backup going forward for longer than that. Maybe look, I'm not saying it means he doesn't get a look as a starter at some point down the line, but like because we're talking years for both of these guys, like that are 19.
More than likely, yeah.
So I'm like, what I'm saying is that, like, right now, no, not even close. Sam Harrison's the number one, Kolosov's number 2. That's the way it's going to be. But I wouldn't be shocked if a few years down the line, while you're still in that in between, waiting for whether it's Bjarnason, Zavragin, whatever the case may be, like, you've got these 2 guys who are clearly making an impact in their leagues. We had said that from the jump. Well, specifically more about Bjarnason, that it was, listen, he's going to be at juniors when World Juniors roll around, his name is going to come up. He should be on the team, probably. That's an expectation. He is now officially is on the team.
Did that.
So now among all of the Canadian junior players, he's one of the top 3 goalies according to the people who put that roster together.
Which, to be fair, those people have been questioned quite a lot this year, but that's a story for a different show.
Not with the goaltending, though. When that World Junior preliminary roster came out, nobody said a word about the goalies. It was,
I will
you're
say
missing that defenseman, you're missing that for. Although it was not very long. Like, we had a big discussion about some of the names that were left off that list, and we even said T.J. Ginla was an interesting one. And not more than 2 days after it was announced he had a surgery and was out very long term.
Oh, and then it was super weird though, because a bunch of the other people that
we talked about got, like, added later as people started dropping,
and then got
and then
Beckett
anyway.
Beckett Seneke added and then cut.
Breck got cut.
Correct. Added and then cut. Like, it's just very strange decisioning out of Team Canada, and I don't know what's going on there. It almost seemed like they added those people to cave to public pressure and then cut them because they didn't like them that much.
Maybe. I don't know.
Well, what are you? Okay, anyway. Again, story for a different show. Back to the Flyers situation. We did have Kolosov play on Thursday night against Detroit. He looked fine. He looked really solid. He did the job right. I was going to say that. Can we talk about that second period for just a second? Because that was the closest I've seen 5-on-5 hockey to looking like 3-on-3 hockey in a long time. Because there was probably a 2 or 3 minute stretch there in the second period where it was wide open.
I don't think it started that way in the period. It got
no, definitely not.
It was like 5 minutes or so in, and all of a sudden everybody threw everything out the window. There was 2 breakaways or something like that. There was at least 2 odd man rushes. There was a breakaway for oh goodness, who had the breakaway? Joel Farabee was stopped on a 2-on-1, and then Couturier had the breakaway. I think is what it was.
Was it Konechny?
No. No. Okay. No, it was only those 2 chances. But it was those 2 chances. There was a 2-on-1 the other way for Detroit at one point in time. Like, in that mix, like, it was all over the place. Like,
Cam Talbot made some stellar saves. Kolosov made a couple of good saves. Like, it was
but it
was a sequence, man.
It does set up the first goal for Laughton, which was, to hell with this. I'm just gonna let a clapper go on a breakaway because I'm not I'm not taking my chances. And he sure ripped one. you know, like I texted the group. I don't remember seeing a guy like, and I don't even think it was a legit breakaway. I think it was a penalty shot that I'm thinking of, but I don't remember a guy going in alone and letting a clapper go since Claude Giroux did it in a shootout. I think as a Flyer.
One day we will have is Scott Leclaire actually John Laughton, or is Scott Laughton actually John Leclaire discussion? But I don't think today is that day.
Funny you should say that. I'm bringing the Laughton tab back up for this part. Funny you should say that because the last guy, we were wondering this after the game. Who's the last Flyer who scored 4 goals?
It was John Leclaire in 2002.
And it was John Leclaire. There was some discussion that, there was some discussion. No, it was 2002. It was 2002.
Okay, it was. Okay.
Right. There was some discussion over another player who it might have been that was very close in time frame that I think is it weird to say John Leclaire was an afterthought because it was expected he would do it kind of at some point in his career, you know, and he did, obviously. Like, he's he did 3 times with the Flyers, by the way, because this has only happened before Scott Laughton did this on Thursday. It's only happened 16 times in franchise history.
And 3 of them were John Leclaire.
3 of them were John Leclaire. 4 of them were
in the dead puck era, by the way. John Leclaire's so underrated. So stupid underrated.
Give me 5 seconds here because I had it up before. Give me 5 seconds to give you the records, because it's right there for the Flyer records. There's only here's your list of 4 goal scorers. Okay, the very first guy who ever did it was Rick McLeish. Did it in February of 1973 and then did it again in March of 73. So there's 2. Okay. I mentioned Leclaire already once. That's 3 times, and 3 times were they coming? Depends on how you like. I guess the whole thing is dead puck era. Sure, it was once in 97, once in 98, and once in 2002.
I think dead puck's roughly 96 to the lockout.
Right.
Roughly.
Now here's an interesting one for you, by the way, because twice he did it against Montreal.
Love that, Johnny.
By the way, there was a video. Or there's video, like, if you dig, like, you fall down that YouTube rabbit hole, you know what I'm talking about. Like, there is video. First of all, there is video of the last 4-goal game of that one in Montreal. But one of the Montreal games in 97 was a home game. And that's a game that I think the final score of the game is 9-5 or something like that. So really funny that you say dead
game.
Yeah, I guess so. But in particular, because of what season it was 1997. The Legion of Doom that day, I think, combined for 17 points or something like that.
That's a good game. Yeah, I remember that one.
But the last goal, for a moment, they think, because this is still, you know, Jim Jackson's calling the game on the clips and things like that. If they think for a moment Leclaire scores a 5th, and it's actually Lindros who scores, and I think Leclaire gets an assist on it, so he ends up with 5 points anyway in the game. But I think, for a moment, and because if it would have happened, that would be the record. Nobody has ever scored 5 in a regular season game. So that's an interesting tidbit for you there. And ironically enough, the guy who does have 5, right? Because obviously we're referring, like, Reggie Leach scored 5 in a playoff game once, right?
Yeah. Never
scored even 4 in a regular season game. He's not one of the guys on the list. I'm promising you. Like this list has other goal scoring types that you would expect. Like Lindros did it once, Rick Tocchet did it twice, Brian Propp. The name obviously that comes out is Tim Kerr did this 4 times out of 16 going into Thursday, right?
See, that's insane. I did do I did a quick Google on John Leclaire's era adjusted stats. If you adjust his prime,
okay,
7 seasons in a row of 50 goals.
Does he hit 60 at any point during one of those?
It's like an average thing. You kind of average it out to 50, but it averages out to 50.
But see, because this is why when you era adjust like that, I guess this is why players like Lindros has definitely gone on the record and said it. I think there's others who have played with him that have said Leclaire should be in the Hall of Fame.
Look, John Leclaire the fact that John Leclaire's not in the Hall of Fame is an absolute joke.
Then
absolute joke.
Here's the thing. You've got then you've got a list of Flyers then that you could say the same thing about that need to go in before Leclerc comes into the picture. Honestly, like I'm sorry, I've been you know when we do this show and we've rolled this around, I've been beating the drum for Brindamore for years that he should be in, and honestly, if you're going to make that argument for, and I know the errors are a little different, obviously, but if you're going to make that argument for John Leclerc, I think you can make the argument for Brian Propp too.
I agree with you.
Brian Propp's got 1,000 points. He's got 1,000 points.
I know. The one thing I will say about Brindamore, though, and it's unfortunate, if he goes in, he probably goes in as a king.
Well, sure he does, especially as
a of course he does. Of course he does, and he should. That's the cup. That's the picture. Like that's Rod Brindamore, and I know.
Listen,
it hurts as a Flyers fan, you know.
Like I understand that, but like, listen, you know as well as I do, and this room, this whole set behind me, all this stuff all over the place. There's stuff all over the place, right? I've got a picture of Rod Brindamore over in this corner, and I've got a puck over here that's ready to go on the wall. The second, whenever I can get more space to figure that out. But what team do you think he's representing in both of those? It's Carolina.
Yeah, that's Rod Brindamore,
right? And it's not even close. Like
I picture him in the black '90s jersey.
No, that's fine. And he is a Flyers Hall of Famer for a reason. There's nothing taking away from that.
But I acknowledge that that's not the correct picture of him, objectively speaking.
Because guess what? I don't care. It didn't even matter what his numbers were. What's his crowning moment as a player?
Yep, that raising that cup.
Exactly. What do you think the picture is?
That's why Nicholas Obey-Cabell will always be a Colorado Avalanche.
For dropping the Stanley Cup for the picture?
Right. Okay, so
back to the other games.
Working back around to the Flyers here, there is one more game to talk about. I think we've put it off because it's probably the least fun game here to talk about. Saturday afternoon, you have the Minnesota Wild. I mentioned it in the group text, but it threw me off the entire first period because it felt like the exact same camera angle as the Wells Fargo Center. So it felt like it should be a Flyers game, but it wasn't. It was a road game. It was in Minnesota. Yeah. And man, Kirill Kaprizov's good at hockey, huh?
Sure, of course he is.
Holy.
Like honestly, there are two moments in this game that changed the whole complexion of the game. Like it was closer than the score appears, obviously.
Absolutely.
Like I don't want to just make it like this was not a game that as a loss I sit there and I put the same level of like bringing them down that I did on the Utah game. Like that was just a boring, bad game. The Utah game was. This was not necessarily that. They were clearly outplayed and they were clearly going up against, they were the inferior team in this. Judging by the way the standings look this year, I get that.
Right, Minnesota, based on points percentage, Minnesota's the second best team in the league.
But I do wonder if the game changes in any way. If either Travis Konechny scores in the first period where Marc-Andre Fleury looks like vintage Marc-Andre Fleury, or they're already down 1-0. They're on a power play, and basically Matvei Michkov saved a Travis Konechny goal.
Yeah, Marc-Andre Fleury really said, "Oh, I only get to play the Flyers one more time," because he looked great. He looked like vintage Marc-Andre Fleury.
But I don't, and as great as
it was infuriating because he's just so damn handsome.
Well, and as great as he looked, he had plenty of moments where it was rub your posts, rub this, rub that, like thank your goal posts, thank Matvei Michkov's stick.
Classic 2008. That's classic 2008 Marc-Andre Fleury.
Sure, and like where I'm coming from with this is just that it was the Kaprizov goal was just brilliant. It's a great shot. Like, here's the thing, I don't want. Because I saw there were a variety of comments that like come in after something like that. I understand. I don't want the goalie to give up a goal like that either. I understand it. It looks bad. It's a bad angle. You don't want to give up a goal there. It's also not a soft goal. There's a difference, right?
No, that was a ridiculously skilled play from one of the best goal scorers on planet Earth.
Right.
That puck bounced around the end boards, and he one time scooped it up into off the mask. Like, hello? Right. Hello?
It's a goal where, as much as I never want to see a goal go in from that angle, there is one guy on the ice that was scoring that kind of goal for that team.
there are maybe 10 guys in the National Hockey League who can score that goal like that. Like, that's not even a one guy on the team. Like, that's a superstar play out of a superstar player.
I'm smiling a little bit because of the fact that I'm thinking of somebody else who I can think of that can pull that off.
I know. And does his name also end in Ov?
Yes, it does. That's true.
Oh, okay. Because by the way, Matvei Michkov has, what are we up to, 27 points?
Yeah, but I'm going to tell you right now, the Detroit game was not very good, and the Minnesota game was not only like as much as he puts himself in a position where if the puck changes direction a different way as it goes off of him, it might still be a goal for him instead. Or
Right.
if Konechny doesn't put it through like to the very far post like that it might be a goal also. Either way. Like that to me was a guy trying to do a little too much in that spot.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so just not the best pair of games. Like I think we were all ready after the Columbus game to be like, look at this 27 games, 27 points. This is great. And it wouldn't have changed my opinion on it going against Detroit. Okay, it was one of those games. You needed one player to do all the offensive work for you because it was one of those games. As much as this also qualifies as one of those games, I think that there was a way that they should have had at least a goal before the end of the second period. Whether they're trailing 2-1 or whether they are tied 1-1 or whatever we want to look at, they should have had a goal before them with the opportunities they had. And I think it turned into a situation where because of that, you're trying way too hard to score a goal. Now I've got to be perfect. The second Fleury makes a glove save like that as well. Now to beat this guy, I got to be perfect. And then I'm going to try to overthink the process. And it just doesn't work. Like, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and you do see that from young players sometimes. You see them, trying to force stuff a little bit. And I did also want to mention here, since we're talking about it, him trying the Michigan on Thursday against Detroit. And oh man, if Talbot didn't have the shoulder up, that was going in. Like, that, it was there.
Sure.
The shot was there and saved, and crazy. Sorry.
I know, and this is going to spark the debate again, because now at least this time, like John Tortorella's comments this time were, I don't agree with it. I don't think it belongs in the game, but I can't fight it anymore. So I might
I've
as well
lost
just
that
back off.
battle.
I've lost the battle. All right. As much as it's an admittance of defeat, there's people who are going to constantly now read into the I don't think it belongs into the game part. Kind of thing.
See, but here's what I'm
because there are other people who doubled down on it. I saw that were like, yeah, I don't think it should be part of the game either. Blah blah blah, and like, listen,
old man yells.
The bigger question about that play isn't about like why do you attempt it right there? It's a delayed penalty. Nothing bad can happen.
Exactly. Worst case scenario, they get the puck. And the whistle blows and you go on the power play.
Right. No, but that's the conversation that's had about that move is
sure.
And that's why I think Tortorella brought up as like when answering about it, it was like an every game thing at the beginning, like preseason. Yeah. I'm gonna go try this every game and whatnot. Like, you got to pick your spots and make it work like the right way. Like, it can't be something that people expect from you. It's got to be element of surprise, I think. And he nearly pulled off the element of surprise a little bit. Like he's there. He was there. And it's interesting. He totally passed one up earlier in the game where I thought I saw the opportunity was there, and I'm like, you can tell he's thinking it, but he didn't do it. That might be the self-control of the player.
I was gonna say, I think he has shown some growth in that aspect, and John Tortorella during his post game said that he had talked to him about it after he was doing it all the time, and said, "Hey, you have to be aware that like there's other plays you can make from back there," and we've seen that since then. We've seen him getting very creative with the passing. We've seen some really good stuff out of him behind the net. But the other thing that John Tortorella said that I wanted to touch on that I think is important. And I think it shows a lot about where John Tortorella is at as a coach right now. What am I going to do? Tell him not to do it? That directly implies that he is not explicitly not telling him not to do it. Now, he may advise him on when to do it and how often to do it, and all of that. But just anyone out there who's thinking that John Tortorella is going to crack the whip and smother this kid, it's not going to happen. It's like I think we are far enough into the season now that I can comfortably say John Tortorella is going to let this kid play. And I think that's really, really good for the development of the player and also for the continued growth of the coach. Like, I think John Tortorella has come a long way.
I hear you. I don't read into that too much, honestly. Like, it's because to me, it's because we're centralizing that around one play that Torts has to admit I can't stop at this point. Like, he's not the only one who tries it. It's been around, like, because we're talking about something that goes back to Torts wasn't even coaching. He's an analyst on ESPN, and guys are doing it. And of course, everybody wants his reaction because it's not.
Because he's the grumpy old man.
Well, because he's the only, I want to say like legitimately the only, but you get my point when I say this. He's one of the only guys in the league anymore who was coaching 20 years ago.
I think
you're asking the Stanley Cup winning coach from 20 years ago. What do you think about this move that nobody was trying in the NHL 10 years ago? That until you had the regular rotation of Zegras, Svechnikov, these guys, the guys who were drafted in 2014 and beyond, right? 2015 and beyond, whatever it may be, right? Like, this wasn't something that was thought of that much. Like, this was
a new school idea.
And it takes that level of creative player to try to pull it off. And guys are willing to try it a little more because it's something that they see one of their peers doing on a regular basis. But everybody wants to, like at the end of the day, I can go and try to find a list of coaches who would have been coaching in 2004, right? And I'll probably come across like Peter Laviolette, and I'll come across Daryl Sutter, and Sutter's not even
Lindy Ruff.
Lindy Ruff, yeah. But none of those guys are going to say it as outspokenly as John Tortorella is. So when it happens, and when John Tortorella's got a guy on his own roster that's able to potentially pull it off, that's attempted it, the question comes to Torts. Why? Because you want a soundbite.
What happened when Michkov tried it in an early practice? I saw tweets that he tried it immediately, instantly followed by, and here's what Torts thought. Here's what Torts did when he tried it. Here's what, because all the focus is on, well, what does John Tortorella think about it?
Well, was it Michkov or was it somebody else from a year ago that somebody had tried it? So it might have still been Michkov. It might have been early on, but somebody had tried something, and Tortorella, I don't remember if it was last season that something like this happened, so it was before Michkov or if it was Michkov himself, but something happened where it was, this happened, and right away Farabee turning around, Konechny and Farabee turned around and looked at him immediately, right?
I think that might have been the one in camp, but regardless,
okay, right. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying, right? Because the players know it too, right?
Sure.
This is who John Tortorella is. He's the old school guy. This new school thinking, I don't want it around. I don't want that type of skill, flashy play that shows up like everybody.
But I think he has shown an acceptance of, I may not necessarily like it, but that's where the game is at. And if it gives us a better chance to win, then I'm going to go with it.
What was the comment then? I'm not jokingly, I'm taking it off the board. No, right. I'm not taking it off the board. Right.
Exactly. And I think frankly, I feel like I've been a bit of a John Tortorella supporter this season, which is kind of strange. But I feel like he's kind of catching a lot of flack. And I think this is something that he does deserve some credit for. He acknowledges and to some extent tolerates the fact that his views are a touch outdated.
Well, and to me, one of the things, because this will touch on something else Michkov related that isn't anything to do with the type of goal he's trying to score there or anything like that, right? But people read into way too much on a base level of what they see that doesn't dive deeper into the situation. Here's what I mean by that. One of the comments that start this conversation off, and it has nothing necessarily, it does have a little to do with the move, but it doesn't at the same time, is that Well, it does actually, because it was the timing of when Michkov attempted it. It was early in the second period. It kind of is what got that free for all style going a little bit in a way, because after the power play, then 5-on-5 opened up like crazy, right? But it came down to the first period. You kind of like it wasn't the best, like for both sides. It kind of was one of those types of periods. And is there something like that? Konechny had said something about how that was what was talked about in the room, that it was okay. That was kind of like that was the type of period it was. It's time to start putting more together. It's time to like, you know, the game is there for the taking to make it your style, right? Or whatever, right? And Torts was asked more along the lines of Konechny said something was said between periods. Is Michkov the type of player who takes what was said between periods and then goes out and kind of consciously makes a decision to try a play like that? And John Tortorella's response was, I don't think he knows what the hell I'm even saying. I don't. And he's laughing about it, like, right, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I saw stuff floating around on social media about you can't get a translator in there to make sure he knows what those mean. Like, no, you don't know what's going on. You want to talk about the fact that, like, from a media perspective, like from my standpoint, and it's something that people can sit there and say is us complaining equally as much, right? That earlier in the year, it was they don't have a guy there every game, it feels like, so we have to play a guessing game on when we're going to get Michkov. And really what it came down to, actually, to tie into another talking point from both the game that we're talking about with this move and what we've already talked about on the show, it was Kolosov's NHL debut against Montreal. And it was, there's nobody here to do this, so we're not getting Michkov, we're not getting Kolosov. Michkov had just, well, I don't think he had just done anything, honestly, because they had played Minnesota the day before and won a game. It really had nothing to do with his play, but we hadn't gotten him at a home game all season, I think. And Kolosov had just started a game. It made his NHL debut, started. He was the first Belarusian goalie to start an NHL game. It's a monumental thing, and he's not available because we don't have a translator. And it was like right after that game, because things were written about it. It was like right after the solution was found. No, do they have somebody on the road all the time for this? No, they do not. But see, my point is that this is what I mean by taking something at face value. I don't think I think they have a plan in place for communicating with him. And Torts kind of detailed some of it, but I think you're taking it at face value that there's nobody there to translate. No, I don't think that's the case at all. Stop with that.
Well, okay, so a couple things here. I know for a while they were relying on Igor Zamula to do a decent chunk of the translating, to the point where it may have detracted from his playing game. Um, I think
that's a conversation
people
to have for another day.
fair enough. I think there is a reasonable expectation that Comcast Spectacor, the company that owns the Philadelphia Flyers, can afford to have someone there at very minimum for all media appearances. Now, if you don't like, that somebody should be there on call, on standby every game, so that if he is going to be there in media availability, there is a competent translator there.
Right.
I think that's a reasonable expectation from media, fans, etc.
Well, and I think they've already solved that, because lately you've gotten more of that anyway. Like, I can think of multiple games where we've gotten one of the two with regularity at this point, because at this point, Slava Kuznetsov's the guy who's been translating for both Michkov and Kolosov in these situations, and I'm pretty sure he's at every home game now.
Okay.
That was not the way it was.
I think that is the minimum.
Right. That was not the way it was at the start of the year. It's not a surprise. Like, for example, we get the text from PR during the third period in Boston about any player suggestions. And right away, the first thing on there is Slava's not available today. Because obviously, Michkov had scored 2 goals in the game in Boston.
You want to talk to him.
You probably want him for a game like that, but they're letting you know right now he's not available today. And tomorrow, that's more of a possibility for tomorrow. Okay, fine. It is a road game, and I understand what they try to save is in the most extreme circumstances that on the road they could possibly get a phone one going. but they don't have a guy traveling all the time with them for this.
And I think they should. I think if you're talking about, I know that we are not comparing this on a 1-to-1 scale here, okay?
Okay.
But if he's going to be your Shohei, and again, I know he's
And I
1/10 of
understand that.
1% of Shohei. I
See,
think
but
there's a
but see,
reasonable expectation that for a superstar, you have someone with him until he's comfortable in English.
but I don't think. See, what I'm saying is that I think people are taking this too far in terms of face value. You're making it sound like nobody on the team is able to communicate with this guy, whereas I don't think that's the case at all. I think there's a big difference between having somebody follow the kid around as a media perspective thing and having somebody in the room who can get a message across from the coach to the player.
I completely agree. And I'm speaking more on the media side of things because I'm
Right.
talking
And I don't
about
care about that. Like I
okay.
don't care about it near as much as other people probably do on the
As
media side.
as
Honestly.
as as far as in the room, I think you have enough guys there that, like you said, can get a message across, right? That speak, that understand what's going on in English and can get the message across to him in Russian or whatever he's most comfortable in. And I do also think that there's a pretty solid motivation within the player to be learning English. Like we've seen it coming out of him. We've seen him talking a little bit on the bench. We've heard a few things come out. He's, cracks a joke here and there in English. Like he's further along the English path than I think a lot of players would be at this stage of their move. And I think
What,
he has a real desire
like,
to learn English because he knows that is a difference maker.
but what like, I think what I'm coming across with is that it's the bluntness of John Tortorella in a press conference setting to sit there and say, I just don't think he understands what I'm saying, which everybody then freaks out and goes, so he doesn't understand anything. So why don't they have somebody there who can help him understand? They do. Come on.
I and
He, he's
I
in a
also
locker
assume that
room. Like,
I also assume that John Tortorella was kidding a little bit.
because he laughed right after he said it, by the way. So that doesn't mean
Right.
they're not taking steps to do it. Like I get it. Like what you're
Like
also no, what you're also trying to talk about in that situation is think about what the question is being asked. This wasn't a tape session where we're going to sit down, a translator is involved, and we're really going to go through stuff in detail.
breaking stuff down in depth.
It's between periods. A guy is going to come in here, a coach is going to come in, give a fiery message like, hey, let's pick it up here. Let's go. Right. Like, and whether
I was
he understands it or not, doesn't matter. I think he gets the vibe of the room.
I was gonna say I don't think you necessarily need to have perfect English to speak hockey.
I'm going to tell you right now, after 2 months of being here, game after game after game, Michkov understands body language.
Exactly. And
And you know
he
how I know you know how I know he understands body language? Because he is reading faces of people in terms of like he knows he is making, as much as it's in Russian and he needs a translator when he's with the media, he is trying to make jokes with people. And
oh
he
yeah,
is reading the fact that when Slava translates it out for him and it does come across as like he's saying something that's funny in some way, we laugh at it. And he can pick up on the fact that yes, and he
he
gets
knows
this,
that.
no, and he gets this smile on his face, like, yeah, I just said something funny, and you liked it. That's great. He's like, come on, like we're really breaking down communication beyond like I said, at face value of he doesn't understand what I'm saying.
The important part is he speaks hockey. That's it. That's bottom line. They get the message across.
Well, yeah,
Like
you
you
know what?
said, they have translators in the tape sessions for the real in-depth nitty-gritty stuff.
Well, and you know
But
what?
on
And you know
hockey's
what?
such a vibey game anyway that if he can go along with the vibes,
Well,
he's
and
got most of the
don't you
message.
think that this would be also be a bigger deal if he had 10 points in 30 games on the season?
As opposed to 27 and
Right.
what, 26?
Well, he's played in 28, but they've played
Oh,
in
20. Okay.
what or 29 now, I think it is. So they've played 31 as a team, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
If we're sitting here saying your supposed superstar rookie has barely broken double digits in points after a third of the season.
That's a whole different animal.
right? No, he's only point per game. He's only in the call they're running. He's only come as advertised. I'm not worried about whether or not like the coach is sitting here who's blunt and just says it like it is going to sit there in the media and go, yo, between periods, I don't even think he knows what I'm talking about.
And let's be honest. Okay. Are Russians known for subtlety? I'm sure him and John Tortorella understand each other just fine.
No, so then in the same vein, then he doesn't understand anything that's being said when they win a game and somebody goes out and points at somebody and they're clapping like crazy. He has no clue what the hell's going on. Right?
And I'm sure he knows some of it. Like I'm sure they've explained it to him at this point. But it's pretty funny.
But also, did we or did we not get a video from a game? Great game, guys. Good win. Coley's the best player.
In English, to the ring.
In English.
Message. And
I'm
like,
telling you, like
really, and really solid English. Like he sounded fairly comfortable with that.
And it's basic, but it's going to get there. It's going to take time. Like I think everybody wants to rush into something because of the fact that it's not to your liking, that the coach. And honestly, there's an element where, and I'm not sitting here saying that I agree with everything John Tortorella does as a coach. I understand that. I think it's people who also have their preconceived notions about John Tortorella and want to use it as he doesn't understand you. Why hasn't anybody done anything about this? Believe me, I think they have. I don't think
it's happening.
Right. Well, I just think you're taking everything at face value at that point. You're taking a quote at face value that he doesn't understand me.
Listen, I know John Tortorella is blunt and straightforward, but the man has subtlety. The man has nuance. Like he knows how to crack a little bit of a joke.
What did we say what did we say the record was over 17 games before they lost to Minnesota? It was 10-4-1
and 3. Yeah.
Does that sound pretty good? Does that sound like it's a problem area, that stuff's not working out with coach to players, that you've got a rookie Russian who doesn't speak English more than a few words? And
they bounced back after losing 3 straight.
Right.
You won your next 2.
Right. And then you lose the, as we probably had said it all along, the scheduled loss in Minnesota because they're that good.
Top 3 team in the league by most metrics. Right. Exactly. And listen, I think the Flyers are okay. I think we're getting to the point. We have a decent chunk of the season here.
You're 10 games away from halfway.
I think this year's team is closer to what last year's team was than what the expectation of last year's team was. Better than we maybe thought. And when I talked about this season going in, I talked about the fact that it's a pretty similar roster. A lot of your younger players hopefully take a step, but essentially, as far as the roster goes, you're down a couple defensemen, but you're also up Matvei Michkov for Cam Atkinson. And I know Cam Atkinson's been playing in Tampa, and I think he's been hurt, but regardless, that's an upgrade. And we've seen that as an upgrade, right? We have a guy who is second on the team in points behind only Travis Konechny, who's going to be representing Team Canada, by the way. So we're talking about, he's already probably in the top 5% of players in the league, top 10 at the max. Like we're already talking about, in Matvei Michkov, we're already talking about a guy who is climbing the ranks of the elite. And obviously it's going to take some time to get there, but 30 plus games in.
Right. It's the skill set, though. It's what you're seeing in the skill set and the clutch gene that he's got and all that stuff like that. It's everything else that you're sitting there going, it lines up that this is a guy who, even though he doesn't, but even though he doesn't score on it, even though he attempts the Michigan thing, doesn't score on it and all that stuff like that, it sits there and tells you right now that he's going to be a fun watch for years, and you're just getting this. You're just scratching the surface of it. He just turned 20 this week.
Tim Jackson said on one of the broadcasts this week, I don't remember which one it was, they're getting to the point already that anytime he gets the puck with a little bit of space, you expect magic to happen. And we're talking about a kid who's 20, 30 games into his career. And it's absolutely insane.
Now, can I tell you a place where I think your vibe is coming from, or where you're getting your opinion on last year's team to a degree?
Okay.
Because Michkov makes them better than they would have been last year. I get that. Like you didn't really like outside of and depending on who you ask, I guess, I mean, there's people who are really ready to just jump and go, well, Emil Andre's a direct replacement of Sean Walker. And
You get it.
I wouldn't go that far.
I wouldn't go that far either, but
but like,
can I say this? Can I say between Travis Sanheim looking better and Cam York looking really solid, and also Emil Andre, that you have replaced Sean Walker in the aggregate over last year?
somewhat. Like, here's the thing. I don't think Cam York has been fine since coming back from injury.
Better than he was last year.
Well, I'm not talking about collectively on the season. I think he was playing great going before the injury. I'm saying since coming back, I would call it fine. I don't think he's played well. I think he's had too many games where I can't qualify him as playing well. Sorry.
No, that's valid. That's valid. It's taking some time to get him back up to speed.
And like, perfect example, he's coasting on the third goal against Minnesota.
Yeah.
He is gliding back on that goal, and it's a terrible look for him.
I assume he's getting torn apart in tape sessions over this little 3-day break here.
I'm sure it's a clip. I'm sure it's a clip for sure. But he's been okay. Sanheim's been really good. Andre, I think, took a step back in the last handful of games too, somewhat from the hey, I took a major hit that at the time was reviewed for a major penalty. It wasn't, by the way. That was the right call, but still, you get the point.
It looked bad in real time. I understand why the refs called it 5.
I think they were just getting it right.
Given the fact that they have an opportunity to take a look at it, right? I do like refs exercising that option,
right? And I think you can lump in Sanheim's growth, Andre coming into the picture and being more solidified in the role this year. What Ristolainen's done over the last
looked good.
Games, he's been good.
Nick Seeler's kind of the same Nick Seeler.
I was gonna say,
for the most part.
I don't even think, honestly, I don't even know if Sealer's been as impactful this year as he was last year. Completely. It doesn't mean.
But I think he needed to be last year.
Hold on. I'm not calling it a major step back by any stretch. I'm just saying I don't think it's as impactful.
Okay.
Do you want to know what I think it honestly is? I don't think Nick Sealer's blocking as many shots because I don't think people are taking as many.
That's fair. I will say, I think kind of what's happening here is that Travis Sanheim has taken over for Sean Walker. Cam York has taken over for Travis Sanheim. Everyone's kind of just Emil Andre took over kind of in that Nick Seeler spot. Obviously a little bit of a different role, but it's interesting. I think in the aggregate you're getting as much we're getting out of your defense.
Yeah, understood. But what I was going to say about the vibe thing that you're coming from, or where I think it's coming from, is what you're seeing, at least temporarily. They are 2-3-1 this month in 6 games. That shouldn't be enough to keep them on the cusp of a playoff spot. To me, it shouldn't be. No, it shouldn't be. And then I look, and I see that despite everything, despite all the stuff that's gone on, Boston is still only 3 points ahead with a game, and the Flyers have a game in hand. I saw as things played out yesterday before the Flyers lost to Minnesota, obviously, but I saw as things played out. Oh, look, the New York Rangers lost another game, 5-1 to the LA Kings. A team that just right now. No, a team. I've said it on the last two.
I've said it on the last 2 shows, but I don't know how Peter Laviolette still has his job right now.
I keep waiting for it.
He's got to have pictures of James Dolan somewhere. Anyway,
not unless the Trouba thing is what starts this. It's not the coach, it's the players thing. I mean, this is the same team that before Laviolette had Gerard Gallant in there, and it's
yeah, they're talking about shopping Chris Kreider though.
You've had the same core for how long though?
Man, if I'm Chris Kreider and the performances in the playoffs he's put up for that anyway, regardless, we're not a Yankees podcast. I am thriving on the downfall of the New York Rangers, also kind of the New York Yankees because that's pretty funny, and the San Francisco 49ers. It's a great time to be a hater right now.
Well, either way. So the point I'm making is that the Rangers have had every opportunity in the last several games to pass the Flyers again.
Yep.
Not happening right now. Hasn't happened. If I just go, I'm trying to pull up Saturday's schedule really quick so I can see because the Rangers lost. Pittsburgh lost in overtime. They stay behind the Flyers. They could have tied. They could have tied, and by virtue of games played, moved ahead. They don't. right? Okay, the Islanders didn't play. That's why. The Islanders have the Blackhawks on Sunday. So there's a chance that they move ahead. But still, that would also well, no, but guess what? If the Islanders pull ahead with a win or even with a point, actually with a point, they don't pass the Flyers because there's again a game in hand involved.
Well, and then the nice thing is if we switch over to looking ahead here, the Flyers are even going to have some more points or some more opportunities to gain points this week. As you mentioned, there's a couple of rematches this week. You get Detroit first half of the week, you get Columbus on the back half of the week. It's an LA game sandwiched in the middle there, but Detroit and Columbus are two extremely beatable teams. You just beat both of them, and neither one of them are getting better anytime soon.
See, it's interesting too because I don't like LA's not going to be near as good of a team or shouldn't be near as good of a team as you just played in Minnesota. They're good, obviously, and they, say what you will about the Rangers, I guess, whether dismantling the Rangers is a sign of more about the Rangers or a sign more about the Kings. Either way, that's going to be the one I'm most interested in. It is on the back end of a back-to-back, so that worries me a little bit, but I think you should go into Detroit refreshed. Detroit was not a great team by any stretch, so I'm a little not worried about that, but I feel like that's one you've got to take. The Columbus game at home you should take, and like this should be another at worst. Like I should be able to reuse that tab next week and say 2-1 or even better 2-0-1 would be nice, and 3 points in 3 straight would be a pretty good way to go into the final game that they have against Pittsburgh before you have that longer break, and then it's done. Like they're right there. I mean, like I was looking for, what did we say that they needed? 7 wins and 3 overtime losses in the month would get them the point total that they had a year ago through December, I believe is what it was,
okay.
or at the same game marker number at 38 games. They've got 2 wins, they've got 1 of the overtime losses. So look, they got a lot of work to do. They would need to win 5 of the last 7 to get it there. And listen, potentially 5 of the last 7, if you're just talking wins, and they might not get the overtime losses, but 5 of the 7 might be winning against Detroit again, winning against Columbus again, beating Pittsburgh, beating Anaheim, beating San Jose.
I think the path to it is right there.
The problem is you don't have room for another Utah.
Well, you do if you come out and you beat LA.
Well, right now you don't though. So your next game out, which by the way, I fully like, one of the things I'd be worried about with this Detroit game is I didn't like the way that the game against Florida started, because it felt like you were skating through quicksand to start the game because of the fact that you hadn't played in 4 days.
Well, hopefully, knock on wood, Detroit's also going through the same gap. So theoretically, they have a similar, start to the game. And also, they're unlikely to punish you as severely as the Florida Panthers did. They just don't have the same talent.
Detroit, sure, I get that.
Right. Like, quite frankly, just wanted to mention it here. Patrick Kane looked awful in that game.
Patrick Kane, well, okay, this is part of the problem with the Detroit roster, though, is that it's got a bunch of guys on it who you're trying to squeeze the last little bit out of. It's like
Tarasenko looked awful too.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm sitting here looking at it going, Patrick Kane.
I say that they're both scoring hatties on Wednesday.
Patrick Kane got that 1 scoring chance and missed the net. Tarasenko didn't have a great game. Look, they've got some nice young pieces on that roster too, obviously, but they've got a bunch of guys who are just a bunch of guys at this point.
The Yzer plan is spinning its wheels a little bit, but
people are bringing it into question, because at the end of the day, you go look at the standings. Where are they sitting in all of this? They're not great. Yeah, it's not great.
They're on the bottom end of the quagmire.
And even though the entire Eastern Conference is 1 good winning streak away from making the playoffs, honestly, like
they're also 1 losing streak away from being done.
Well, it's just you don't want to be that team, because it means you're going to play teams that are better than you in some capacity more often than not. That's the point.
Absolutely.
If the Flyers were sitting there, I'd be saying the same thing.
Well, and like we talked about, the fact that the Flyers are sitting kind of towards the top end of that same muck in the middle of the standings there. It keeps you in the playoff race. It keeps you in a spot where you control your own destiny. If you're winning games, you'll be in a good spot.
Right. And I just think where I'm coming from with this is that you sit there and you go Detroit, Columbus, Pittsburgh, Anaheim, San Jose are all on the schedule. They're all behind you. Pittsburgh's played a little better of late. Anaheim's gotten some things going a little bit of late also. That might play a factor, but you should still hopefully go in and take, like, again, to me, it's that feeling of if you play the way you played the second period against Florida, you play the way you played mostly against Boston, you certainly play the way you played against Columbus and Detroit the first time around, you'll be better than those teams for it. What worries me is that, like, you come out of this month of December where there's opportunity with Vegas, Toronto twice, Dallas, Anaheim's in there, and then Florida again. That is the stretch that if you aren't playing a little bit better by that point, that is a stretch that could destroy you.
Sure. Yeah, that's true.
And take all of the vibes right out of play. So
I did want to mention, we talked about some stats a little bit today. I did want to mention the Money Puck has the Flyers at like 71% to make the playoffs.
Was that before the loss?
That was on Sunday. It comes out on Sundays.
I thought it was every day. I thought it was every day.
I think I saw it today, but
I'm opening it up now just to see what.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was pretty sure it went.
No,
was it not?
No, that was yesterday's number.
Was that yesterday? Okay, yes. It was before that loss. Okay.
It's not a horrible number. It's reflective of exactly what you think happened yesterday. It's 49.1% on money.
Listen, if you told me before the season that on December 15th the Flyers would be sitting at almost 50% on the playoffs, I'd be pretty comfortable with that.
For what it's worth, by the way, who are the teams I said the Flyers are playing this week or in general for the rest of the month?
Detroit, LA, Columbus.
Detroit 12.9%, Columbus 1.6%, Pittsburgh next Monday 10.2%, Anaheim 1.2%, San Jose 0%.
And LA, just out of curiosity, like I know that's probably a pretty high one, but
93.9%.
Okay, yeah. They're a decent team. But like I said, that means that by the numbers, according to Money Puck, according to the eye test, according to the standings, according to, all these tests that we use to evaluate hockey, you should win most of your games the rest of the months. If you win the 7 that we kept talking about, then you'll have the same number of wins as you had last year at the same time. Obviously, you hope to be better than last year's back half, but you put yourself in that position. You put yourself in a spot where, like I said, you control your own destiny. If you're winning games, if you're playing good hockey down the stretch, you can do things.
I also just think at this point, you're 31 games into the season. You won 2 more games this week. That put you back into the playoff spot for a little while, and then you're out of it when you lose a game and a couple other teams win because it was a Saturday and it's a busy day around the league. But you're hovering in that spot, and we'll do the show next week, and it'll be 34 games are in the books. Then we'll do, probably another one that comes up on being at 37, 38 games. And then you're going to look up, and that 1 week is going to go by and it's going to be past 41. And if you've come halfway through the year and you're there at that point, you might as well be going for it more than you're not. I'm not saying that means that they don't sell something off at the deadline. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. It's more just you start to invest more in the idea that that's a possibility because you're far enough down, and that's why for me, I'm taking the same approach to it as I did last year. I'm not convinced they're going to be there. That doesn't mean anything to me. These percentages mean nothing to me. It's more or less they're there though. And what I kept doing last year was the longer they were there, the more it became realistic. Right.
It probably took me 60 games to fully buy in last year, and just in time for them to completely collapse.
Well, when I finally felt it, right?
Yep.
When did I finally feel it? Do you remember?
No. When it was, oh God, I can't remember. I thought I had it
because it was literally the last game before the collapse started because it was the win against Boston.
The win in Boston.
Yep. No, not it was
against Boston. Right.
But I was down there. It was for every reason that they had for that game to not be, because they had just taken the lead with 4 minutes left in the third, gave up the tying goal again. Tyson Forrester scored with 1.5 minutes left. The place is going nuts. They just beat a team like Boston, who at that point in time was not clinging to a wild card spot or third in the division or whatever it was.
They're still
They
one
were
of the
going
teams
to
in
make
the league.
right. They were going to make the playoffs, and I was convinced at that point. I'm like, well, they just beat Boston.
They're beating
That
good
way.
teams.
No, but it was they just beat Boston that way, and I wasn't worried about the fact that when like even after the fact they lost to Florida the next day with just a bad goaltending performance. They lost in overtime to the Rangers, but those were two games that you were sitting there going, points were going to be at a premium. You've gotten yourself in that spot to the last 9 games that feel like you should win 4 or 5 of them easy, and they won 2 of them.
And then they didn't. Yeah. Well,
and we know we know the answer by now, right? Like, what did I just say about it? They should win 4 or 5 of them. 4 or 5 wins in those 9 games. They're in the playoffs. That was what it was. What it was, and they just fell apart at the end. And it is what it is. But my point in saying all this is that it took me to game 71 for me to sit there and really point it out and be like, all right. Now I can tell you on this show for sure and certain, I think they're making the playoffs because they just won a game like that. And but that's how far into
and then they didn't.
Well, even though
I know.
Even though they didn't, that's how far into the year it was for me to sit there and be like, this is what it took for me to feel like it was really going to happen, that I could commit to it. You might have been there after, like you said, you might have been there after 60. I needed 11 more games.
You did need a lot more time than I did.
Which was like I needed all of March. You were there after they beat Florida the way they did, with that last minute third period goal. You're there for that. You're there for, well, they bounced back and they beat Toronto, after losing to Toronto. They, take your pick on a bunch of these other games that could have been, right? You were there the way they beat Tampa when the lights went out in the place, right? Like, it's stuff like
the lights out in Tampa.
Right. But it's whatever, right? Like, I just wasn't there yet, and I'm still not going to be there with this one. We're going to, I won't be, I'm going to tell you right now, there's only 10 games until we get to this point. I'm not going to be there halfway through.
And I probably, I don't know. I've kind of said a couple different times that I think they're making the playoffs this year, so I might already be there. But I get what you're saying, and I am obviously still, skeptical about this team too. And I am.
Well, can I say also for one of the
white knuckling it?
Well, as much as that's a good quality, can I say also one of the things that not worries me, but that has me a little concerned right now is, you win that game against Florida that you come back in, you win the game in Boston that you looked really good in for 2/3 of it, I would say easily. You win this game, win on the road against Minnesota this week, something like that. You finish the job against Vegas. Like, the Ranger game was good, but the Ranger game looks a little bit less and less promising.
The win is aging poorly. Yeah.
Right. It kind of when you see what the Rangers are going through is my point. I kind of feel like I need to see that, like what made us what made us even have that. And I wasn't there yet, obviously, like I said, but what made us have that conversation? Oh, they beat Dallas 5-1. Oh, and Tippett scoring highlight reel goals against Jake Ottinger. All right. I can't deny what that says. They're winning, they're beating Colorado. They're beating, right? Like, they won games against all of those types of teams. And you could sit there by the end of the thing and go, well, how am I supposed to deny what they are? They've beaten blank and blank and blank and blank and do that.
How can I say they're beating teams they shouldn't beat when they've beaten all of these teams?
Right. I can go look now and sit there and go, well, you haven't played Winnipeg yet, I don't believe, correct?
I don't think you have. No.
Okay. You haven't won against Washington. Yes, you did win against Minnesota, but you just played Minnesota and lost. You haven't played Jersey yet. You lost in a shootout to Vegas. You're going to play LA. Haven't this week for the first time. Haven't played Toronto. You lost in overtime to Edmonton. You've lost twice to Florida. You've lost twice to Carolina. See a pattern here? Last year it was you've beaten every one of those top 10 teams at least once. I can say you're in that category. I'm looking at the top 10 and see that they haven't played them or they've lost to them every single time.
Okay.
Short of one win against Minnesota.
And by the way, I did look it up. They play Winnipeg on March 1st and March 6th. So
it is late. Okay.
Those might be 2 monstrous games where you need some points. But,
right.
Well, so
like, after I passed through, they beat Minnesota, which, yes, that's a big deal. I'm not saying it wasn't.
Of course.
Their next highest ranked team that they've beaten is Vancouver at 13th.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
you got some work to do. Like we talked about, you kind of laid out the rest of the month, and they should, air quote, should beat probably 4 or 5 of the teams. You have a couple of tough games against LA to figure things out. I think
Is it wrong of me to look at this week and say I kind of want to see a win against LA because
the LA is your test game. Like I think you should beat
sure, if
Detroit.
anybody in the top 10 is.
Right. You should beat Detroit. You should beat
Well,
Columbus, but LA is the
why,
barometer.
why do you think I highlighted coming out of New Year's? Vegas number 5, 2 against Toronto number 7, Dallas number 11, which I think is also kind of a build from a slow start. They're getting back into that. Florida's back on the schedule in that time. That's number 9. You
got some tough road ahead, but that's why you got to make some hay while the sun shines here. You got to get some points against some of these softer teams.
That's why you've got to beat 26, 25, 24, 28, 27's on the schedule, right?
Yep.
It's exactly why that has to happen.
Absolutely. And hopefully that does happen, and we will be back next week to talk about it. Like I said, we got 3 games to talk about next week. One more show before Christmas. We'll be back just about the same time, right on the same spot. Make sure you're subscribing to our YouTube channel. Hit the like button over there. That really helps us out. Follow the show on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Make sure to follow Kevin, too. He's at Kevin_Durso everywhere except Blue Sky, where it's just at Kevin Durso. Find us everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com. I know I already said the YouTube thing, but subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm just saying it again for algorithm purposes, I guess. All right. Like I said, 3 games this week. We'll be back next week. One more show before Christmas. We'll figure out our holiday schedule here. We might take a week off. A couple of shows here. Things are about to get fun. All right. Until then, see ya.